What is going on, Laker fans? Thank you very much for tuning in on this fantastic Sunday, day before 4th of July. Got a little bit of an itch here. I haven't been on air since last Wednesday, so this is kind of a special edition of Lakers Talk here on YouTube. We call it a Lakers Talk podcast. I got a few things that I want to get into. So obviously free agency started on Thursday at 3 p.m. A lot has gone on, and then a lot of rumors around the Lakers. So what would the Lakers look like if Kyrie came to the Lakers? How would he fit in with the team? What could potentially stop the deal? When should we expect a deal to get done? And then my thoughts on free agency so far. So let me start off with this. I thought a week ago, it was actually last Monday, I had a conversation with Brian Windhorst. And he had mentioned, this was before it had gone down, that Kyrie was going to sign his extension, or not sign his extension, but opt into his final year of his contract. And if you guys have heard Windhorst over the last week, a lot of the conversation has been, hey, even though he opted into that final year, it doesn't mean that there's no chance that a team like the Lakers or that he's not going to get moved or anything like that. However, everything kind of shook once Kevin Durant decided he doesn't want to come back to the Brooklyn Nets, and that's kind of what we're all sitting on. So as I record this podcast right now, for all I know, something can break at any moment, and then this podcast becomes irrelevant, but that's kind of that's the chance you take when you're putting out content around free agency. So let me start with this. What would the Lakers look like with Kyrie Irving? I know we're not at the finish line, but it does seem like there's certainly momentum towards a deal. I did see a tweet from Shams Charania of The Athletic a few hours ago or so, where he basically said that there are other teams still that are involved. Philadelphia is one of the teams. The Dallas Mavericks was another team. I've always, this is maybe in my own head, I am a little surprised that the Brooklyn Nets would be trying to accommodate where Kyrie wants to go. They really don't have to. He's under contract. It's the final year of his contract. And I'm maybe a little surprised that there aren't some teams out there that say, you know what, Kyrie's worth the chance. We're a Kyrie away from having an opportunity to get even further in the playoffs or whatever the case is, just using that as an example. So we'll see. Maybe there's some other suitors that come up. Maybe another team wants to take a chance. Maybe Brooklyn decides, you know what, let's not be so quick to get rid of Kyrie. Let's wait on this thing. But it does feel like that there's momentum that continues to shift towards the Lakers' favor. Now, for the Lakers, it's a no-brainer. If you're the Lakers and you got a chance to get Kyrie Irving, I'll explain some of the positives and the negatives with Kyrie, and I'll do that in a little bit here. But you already saw what Russ, LeBron, and Anthony Davis look like. I've been saying this for a while, that I think those 21 games was enough to see that, listen, this isn't going to be something that changes so drastically just because Darvin Ham came to be the next head coach of the Lakers, and all of a sudden now Russ is going to be a player that fits in perfectly, and he's the proper role player, and he's a great defensive guy, and he finds ways to slash to the basket, and he's the perfect team player. I'm not saying some of those things can happen. I don't see enough benefit to really say to yourself, like, hey, let's take one more shot at this. We know Bron is where he is at this stage of his career. Lakers, it's championship or bust, certainly since LeBron got here. So the no-brainer part of Kyrie coming to the Lakers for a guy like Russ, it's literally a no-brainer, and you would take your chance on that. Now, how would Kyrie fit with the Lakers? Again, I'm making assumptions here. There is no guarantee that he's going to be a Los Angeles Laker, but I do want to kind of go through what it would mean if Kyrie was here. From a basketball perspective, he really truly is a great fit. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Some people will make the argument they don't like, if you look at the last couple years in the NBA, and people are looking at, hey, look, 3 superstars, it doesn't work. Look what happened to Brooklyn. Look what happened to the Lakers. It's not a model that fits. A better model is look what the Milwaukee Bucks are doing, or look what the Golden State Warriors are doing. Now, all those teams have 3 really good players, but they have, from a superstar perspective, from an MVP perspective, it's different. It's different. Klay Thompson and Draymond Green are not MVPs. Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton are not MVPs. So it is different. It's not apples to apples. But there are other teams out there. Boston Celtics, the right role players, kind of growing organically. I mentioned the Warriors. You could kind of take a look at how deep the Phoenix Suns are. There's a model out there that would say, hey, going after the stars and having three of them is not the right model. However, in the Lakers' perspective, I think the Kyrie part of it is you got a player that can score. You got a player that can create for himself. You got somebody that can play off the ball, can play on the ball. And I think a lot of times last year, that's where the Lakers were hurt when LeBron James had to do everything. He didn't have possessions where he could just give the ball up and say, somebody else go get a bucket. Kyrie can certainly do that. But at the same time, Kyrie is such a threat offensively that it makes LeBron and Anthony Davis more of a threat. So I think from a basketball perspective, he's a great fit. From a team perspective, I have no idea what to expect if Kyrie was a Laker. I really don't. Kyrie is in his own little world, and I can't tell you that basketball is his top priority, and I can't tell you that if he was on the Lakers and come next season, he's going to, and let's just say hypothetically, the vaccination requirement comes back and COVID comes back in the winter and some of those restrictions that we had last season coming at. I can't tell you whether that's going to happen or it's not going to happen, and I can't tell you what Kyrie Irving would do in that situation, but Kyrie is in his own little world. So I could tell you that from a basketball perspective, he's great. I can't tell you how he's going to be from a team perspective. He might be the same Kyrie Irving he's been over the last couple of years. Everything's about him. Thinks he's the smartest person in the room. And we could be scratching our heads and be very frustrated with his decisions on the basketball floor, off the basketball floor. So I don't want to make any assumptions on that because I could just talk about it from a basketball perspective, how I think he'd fit really well with LeBron and Anthony Davis. But off the court or, how he approaches the game, I can't give you a guarantee that, obviously that's going to be a perfect mix. However, what I will say, it does put the Lakers, in my opinion, back in that conversation of, okay, that's a formidable opponent. That's a tough roster that you're going to have to go through. Does it still mean Anthony Davis is going to have to play 60, 65 games, maybe hopefully 70 games? Does it still mean that LeBron James is obviously going to have to be at his, almost similar to what he did last year? Of course it does. Nobody's questioning that perspective of it. But Kyrie, LeBron, and Anthony Davis, I will take my chances on 100 out of 100 times. If that's my option versus LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Russ. It's not like we're saying, hey, would you rather have DeMar DeRozan than Kyrie? Or, hey, would you rather have whatever player you want to put in there? We're not making those comparisons because the Lakers don't have that as an option, and they certainly don't have that as a luxury. They're just kind of in this spot where Russ is in the final year of his deal, $47 million. He opted into that contract. Can you make the best of next year? And I think Kyrie gives him an option to potentially make the best of next year. Okay. I want to transition here for a quick second. What could potentially stop this deal from happening? What can stop the Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets of putting together a deal that is of benefit to both sides? Of course, really all we're paying attention to is the Lakers side of this. I think if the Lakers get too greedy, let me put it this way. I think two things can happen. Either A, another team gets in the mix and rolls the dice and says, you know what? It is what it is. Yes, Kyrie comes with a lot of headaches, but if I can pair Kyrie with Luka and do whatever else I could, who they grab Christian Wood, and we'll take our chances over this 1 year, and maybe with our culture and maybe with our ownership, we can make Kyrie buy in for 1 year with this team. I'm just using Dallas as an example because that's really the one team that when Shams put out the list of Philly, he ain't going to Philly to go play with James Harden again. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong there. But I think like a team like Dallas, somebody that thinks they're a Kyrie away from a basketball perspective, they need somebody else to kind of help. And certainly in this case, Kyrie could be at least help with Luka. If another team comes in kind of out of nowhere and Brooklyn's happy with what they're getting or what they're accepting as far as draft compensation, whoever they get back, expiring contracts, whatever the case is, then maybe a team like that swoops in. That's one way I think it could stop a deal from the Lakers getting Kyrie. The other way, like I mentioned, if the Lakers get too greedy, if there's this standoff of Brooklyn asking for 2 first rounders, 2027 and 2029, and Lakers demanding that they're only giving up 1 first rounder, and then it just kind of fizzles out, or another team comes in and Brooklyn decides, all right, we'll just go do a deal with somebody else. So it has to be, in my perspective, something like that I think would be the difference of the Lakers not getting a deal done with the Brooklyn Nets. I saw something earlier, too, that the Brooklyn Nets would want to include Joe Harris as part of the deal. We all kind of know his Joe Harris's skill set. He's a sharpshooter, fantastic shooter. He would be a fantastic fit for the Lakers. The problem is he's injured a lot. So what the Lakers are asking for, from what the some of the rumors were out there, they're asking for Seth Curry instead of Joe Harris. By the way, if you're telling me Seth Curry or Joe Harris, I will take Seth Curry all day long. First off, just the fact that the Lakers can get another shooter out of this whole thing would be amazing in itself. But I'm a fan of Seth Curry, and I think the spacing that dude provides, and he's smaller than Joe Harris, but I think skill set wise, he's fantastic. So, we'll see what happens on that front. But it's going to take something like that, in my perspective. It's going to be the Lakers got too greedy, or they couldn't agree upon Joe Harris or Seth Curry. Something along those lines is what I think could potentially derail this thing. So we'll see what happens there. By the way, can you imagine the Lakers adding in the offseason Seth Curry and Kyrie for Russ? You kidding me? That the Lakers can walk in to next year, and I'm talking about just from a basketball perspective. Another playmaker, a guy that can absolutely take over games, that can take a ton of pressure off of AD and take a ton of pressure off of LeBron, can create for his own, all that stuff that comes with Kyrie, and then a shooter like Seth Curry. What the hell? If they can figure out how the hell to do that, that's a pretty fantastic offseason. I'm not guaranteeing anything, or that's a championship team right there. But damn, does it improve your chances of just being in the mix. And I think that's all you can ask for now in the Western Conference. When should we expect a deal to get done? Doesn't it have to happen in the next couple of days? I mean, wouldn't you think that some of these teams here want to get this over with at some point? Want to feel like they have their roster pretty much set, and I think I think from what I look at, certainly at least what I look at from most of these teams, it doesn't really take that much longer. You're a week into free agency, 10 days at most. Most of the dust will have settled by then, and right now a lot of the NBA is kind of on lockdown simply because what happens to Kevin Durant? What happens to KD? If KD gets traded to a Miami, or KD gets traded to one of these other teams, what are the ripple effects going to be? What does that mean now for other squads that were trying to get KD and they're not going to get him? How do they react to it? And I think that's the only thing, or one of the things that's holding up some of this stuff with Kyrie, whether it's with the Lakers or whether it's another team. So I'm assuming in the next few days, I don't think this thing is really going to drag out. The last thing that I do want to get into is my thoughts on free agency so far. The KD piece has shook the entire free agency market. It really has. And what happens to Brooklyn and what happens to Kevin Durant, of course, is going to be incredibly interesting. I thought it was going to be a quiet free agency. That's what it seemed like as we were approaching, Thursday at 3 p.m. on this past Thursday. I thought it was going to be quiet. And it's not like it's been crazy, because there just really haven't been that many big names. What's happened more of is a lot of players are getting extensions, the Karl Anthony Towns. I know Gobert got traded, and someone explained to me how Gobert is worth that many draft picks. And oh, by the way, if Gobert's worth that many draft picks, what the hell is KD's worth? And I'm sure there's plenty of teams out there scratching their head and disappointed that Minnesota gave up so much to go get Rudy Gobert, because that just ups the value. That makes it so much more difficult to go get a guy like KD. But the dust will eventually settle. I think that, the teams like the Atlanta Hawks that got DeJounte Murray, I thought that was a fantastic pickup. But for the most part, nothing is really all that earth-shattering. The Malcolm Brogdon to the Boston Celtics is a good point guard pickup for them. I know we've been talking about Malcolm Brogdon for a while, maybe potentially coming to the Lakers if the Lakers were trying to get rid of Russ's contract. So obviously that's off the table. John Wall ended up signing with the Clippers. I think the Lakers now have all their focus on Kyrie Irving, and whether they could get a deal done or not, it's been fascinating to watch. I'm in the camp of, and I'm pretty sure every Laker fan is, let's try something different. And even if it doesn't work, we know coming back with the same Kyrie or coming back with LeBron, Russ, and AD doesn't, I think, put all that much excitement into Laker fans' eyes. But if you could walk into next season and you found out a way to get Kyrie Irving to team him up with LeBron and AD, maybe get a Seth Curry on top of that, and some of the other ancillary moves that you made so far this offseason, I think it at least gives you some hope. Could it burn in flames? Of course it can, but it could also maybe have a tremendous upside, so we'll see what happens. So, Laker fans, I appreciate you being a part of this podcast. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Of course, whenever something happens, if Kyrie ends up with the Lakers or if Kyrie ends up with a different team, I'll throw another one of these up on the podcast. I'm back on Tuesday, so still a couple more days until we're back on. Hope you guys have a great 4th of July. Lakers talk coming on Tuesday night as well. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. Enjoy your next couple of days.